I am joined by not only two wonderful cinematographers, but two wonderful human beings. I love these guys to death. They're great. Tom Burston and John Grillo. Tom Burston, CSC NZCS, is a multi-award winning director and cinematographer. Trained at the National Film Board of Canada as a documentary filmmaker. He enjoys he enjoys great success in the feature film and television drama world. Most recently, Tom directed the documentary This Way of Life and One Man, One Cow, One Planet. Burston enjoys the way his work in the dramatic and documentary mediums cross-pollinate each other. Born in Montreal, Tom is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and has dual citizenship in New Zealand and Canada. He is a co-director of Cloud South Films as well, and he is joining us from New Zealand on the other half of the world, which is awesome. John Grillo, who's in Seattle, worked his way up as a camera assistant and operator on many projects such as Bad Boys 2, Collateral, Memoirs of a Geisha, and Miami Vice. With all that he's accomplished as a camera assistant and operator, he's now lighting the screen and has DP'd such projects as Hemlock Grove, The Leftovers, Preacher, Westworld, and of course, Snowpiercer. Thank you guys both for joining us. Tom, especially you, because I know it's quite early there in New Zealand, but I am pleased to have this conversation with you guys right now. And I just kind of wanted to start the first question off by asking you both a broad question, and then we'll get into specifics of Snowpiercer. But how do you feel technology is driving the aesthetic of filmmaking today? Since you guys have come up and worked in film and now it's the digital craze and age. I know any one of you can chime right in.
Well, there's two sides to it. Just a technical question. I can't see Tom here on screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, you can hear us though, Tom, right?
Okay, but I can't see Tom, so just want to, I miss seeing his face. Anyway, I mean, I think, yes, it's amazing what's happened in the last, 10 years or so with technology. There's two sides to it. I think it certainly allows us to be faster in terms of the work we do and how we do it and how we achieve certain things on set that used to take longer. New lighting technology is amazing. The new camera sensors are so sensitive. It really opens up a lot of our creative possibilities and to be able to achieve them quickly. On the other hand, I think the downside to that is sometimes you do go too quickly through, or you move too fast sometimes, and you miss certain things where it used to be that you had time to study a scene a little longer, or your set, or take a little more time to light it and shoot your Polaroids and study them and check your exposures and all of that. That there was that mystery behind a cinematographer's work that I witnessed as a camera assistant for many years from these great cinematographers that I worked for. Digital has made it kind of easier to navigate that, what used to be a mystery, and I think particularly with lights, lights, LED lights, and all this, all these new lights that have come up, they're amazing, on the one side, but I tend to think sometimes that we all maybe start tending to look the same in a way. It's really hard to separate sometimes visuals from others, because we're kind of in a way all using the same lights, particularly LED lights. I don't know, what do you think, Tom?
Well, it's interesting that I came on as the alternating DP, and so you had already set the look, and so this for me was the first time that I'd worked on a set that was exclusively LED lighting, and it made me realize how much the technology drives the aesthetic. So we don't have hard light anymore. And you think back to the, Citizen Kane days, when the camera ISOs were so low that you could only have hard light. You needed all the energy you could get. And they created an aesthetic out of that. And now we're, like you said, with the sensitive modern sensors and LED, wireless LED technology that can change color and do anything instantly. It's a whole game changer. And I noticed one day I was lighting in the tail, and I just wanted to separate one of the characters, and I wanted to put up a backlight that was just specific to that character. And so I asked for an inky or a pepper, I can't remember. And everybody rolled their eyes and they went off running, looking around for an inky, a light that in the past would have been really easy to set up as a no-brainer. All of a sudden there's a big fuss and there's ladders coming onto the set and you have to move people away and the guys are grumbling and there's
the first thing you have to find out if you actually have one.
Yeah, somewhere there was one.
Well, that brings up another point is on TV shows these days, a lot of people may know this and a lot of people may not, there's alternating DPs. And John, you shot the first 3 episodes of Snowpiercer, and Tom hadn't come on yet, and you were working on another project, I think, Tom, up here in Vancouver as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And how does that work? How do you guys collaborate? Do you collaborate? And I know, John, you've been in the same scenario because on Westworld, you came in on the same sort of concept.
Yeah, as the alternate DP, yes.
Yeah, how does that work? And how do you, as a DP, you want to somehow put your stamp on it, your magic, your eye on it? How do you do that?
Well, I think you have to take the...
Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, being the alternate, I'll take that one. I think... you observe what's been provided for you, and it's a team sport, so you go along with you go with the flow. And I think just in the natural process of work, you add your own, unconsciously you add your own signature to it. Except, I mean, in my case, season 2, I brought in my lenses just as a kind of a long-term camera test. But other than that, I think I honored your signature.
You more than honored it. I mean, it was I've been on both sides of the coin, in terms of how it works in television, where if you get hired to do the first episode or the pilot. In this case, on Snowpiercer, they had shot a pilot for the first season originally with another director and DP, and the studio decided to reshoot pretty much the entirety of it. And that's when I came in with a new director and a new showrunner, etc. And had the opportunity to create the look of the show. And that's always very exciting to do that, because I have been on the other side of it as alternate, where you come into a show that's already have a look established to it, like Westworld, and you, like Tom was saying, you try to continue the look, you try to bring a little bit of yourself into it. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you fail, but you honor the show and the tone of the show that's been set. And in this case, I had the opportunity to shoot the first 3 episodes of the season 1 and work, at least almost 2 months in prep as the sets were being built, and work closely with the production designer in terms of redesigning the sets that they used in the pilot and bringing them more down to scale in terms of the train, the size of the train, and so that we would always have this perspective of the train visually. Worked with them. All the whole process of prepping is just very, very important. You look at references, you look at paintings, you look at still photographs to come up with the look for the show. Come up with, here's a still of the train set, how it looked under construction. And this is just part of the many sets that we had, but this particular set is called the tail section, and it was made up of 5 shipping containers. The normal shipping containers that we all know that are about 80 feet long by about 12 or 14 feet wide. The art department took the skins off of them, kept the metal frame, and based on top of that metal frame, built the tail section so that we could have one continuous shot if we wanted to through.
Oh, you lost them for a second there.
Into the other train, and we also put these trains on wheels so that they would sway left and right to give you the illusion of movement, because that was what our show was all about, was keep the train moving, keep the illusion of movement going with lighting, with movement, etc. In the next still, you can see the magic of set decorating and how it transformed that set into the tail section. And we made it as claustrophobic as possible. Here you can see the Pee-wee dolly, so you can get an idea of how narrow the corridor was for us to navigate through with cameras, handheld or Steadicam, or with a cable cam that we were able to hang on the ceiling of the car. So, that's.
If I can,
yeah,
sorry, John, if I can jump in.
Mm-hmm.
If you could bring up those stills of what are the artists that you took the look from, not from,
Sure.
but were inspired to create this look. If you could bring up whom that is,
Yeah.
and that one still of the actual rear car.
Yeah, sure. So for the tail section,
Tail section.
the tail section of the train, which is where, let's say the passengers with the least resources live. I looked at the paintings of Goya. It was a Spanish painter in the 18th century, and he had these paintings called the black paintings, which are very dark in theme, very dark in texture and color, very limited palette. And based on these paintings that I actually had an opportunity to see in Madrid, we kind of came up with a look for the show, which is this still here of the tail section. The darkness surrounding the characters, keeping, making sure that the paint on the walls was dark enough that it would just go into darkness, keeping it really claustrophobic. The wardrobe, who was, Cynthia, our wardrobe, our costume designer, was amazing, and she came up with this color palette of the wardrobe of the characters. It's all browns and beiges and all dirty whites, nothing colorful here. And then we contrasted that with the first class section of the train, which is more like an Art Deco kind of vibe to it. Very colorful, very symmetrical look to it,
Yeah, I remember going on set and seeing all these cars, and it was just sort of blown away by the difference from car to car and class to class. It was pretty fascinating. And Tom, you mentioned lens choices. Like, what goes in choosing the lens and camera systems that you use? And I know you guys were sort of, I wouldn't call it troubled, but it was very interesting shooting situations, only because, it was on stage the whole time, right?
Yeah.
But the cars are quite small. So with the conditions that you're shooting in, what goes in choosing camera systems and lens systems? And what I found interesting is, if you can indulge into this, you guys didn't use zooms at all, correct?
No, I personally don't like them. I like the rigor of a prime lens, and without any constant. John also has the same.
I agree.
I think.
I agree.
And also the Sigmas that we use mostly are very compact and easy. They're easy to use, so that was a no-brainer. The difficulty was the width of those cars, and especially in the tail section. Aesthetically, they look great because you always see 3 walls. And you feel the claustrophobia of the place. But work-wise, it was really difficult. You can't even pass by. You have to get off the train to let somebody carry a piece of equipment on, or stuff like that. It was very, very difficult. But yeah, it was a great challenge. I enjoyed it a lot.
And
Yeah.
from season 1 to season 2, the camera system changed entirely, correct?
Oh yeah, we finally went to a Venice. That was a great camera. My first time with a Venice. Was it yours too?
No,
John?
I had used it before on Westworld sporadically, even though we shot that on 35 millimeter film. We brought the Venice in to shoot night exteriors with it, because it has the advantage of having a high ISO setting, 2500 ASA, which is unbelievable, and it's an unbelievably clean image at 2500. That it blew me away, and so when we started season 2, took a little convincing in production to go the extra mile, but we were able to convince them to switch to the Sony Venice, because we knew that the high ISO setting was going to be very helpful for us. To move quickly and to, because of the low light levels we were using, Tom, all the practicals that are built into the train, and also very important for me, I don't know about you, Tom, but very important for me is, like, I want the actors to feel like they shouldn't see any movie lights.
Yeah.
They should walk onto the set and only see either other characters or extras, the set, and there's no flags and lights and back, stuff like that hanging there. You want to keep it as real as possible for them, because it helps with their performance when they're not distracted by all this stuff. No,
that brings us back to the whole thing about technology driving the aesthetic. I was thinking this morning, about an iconic film of the American New Wave, Fat City, directed by John Huston.
Right.
I think
Conrad
Hall shot it. Yeah. And that was the same sort of philosophy, that the minimalist approach. And if you look at the night exteriors, they are black. They lit the front of the gym. For the one I'm remembering is on a street where his boxing gym is, and the gym is lit, and the next 2 buildings. And then when the camera pans him, Stacy Keach down the road, he just walks into limbo. And today, if you look at, if he'd shot with that, but it was all they could do. It was a low budget film, and that was the state of the art film stock. And today, if you did that, if you look at, Train Spotting 2, which was also shot on a digital camera, the night exteriors are luminous. You can see forever.
Yeah.
The lighting in the foreground is with tiny lights, so that the rest of the world still lives there. It's really
it's hard sometimes on shows, on TV shows, where you don't have the same kind of control as a cinematographer that you might have on a feature film, to go down that path, and stay true to your vision in terms of how dark you want something to be. I tend to light very dark, and I like darkness. But then sometimes when I see the end product, it's been tweaked somehow, and it's unfortunately, it's the nature of what we do nowadays. It's the new reality, where we give up a little bit of control, and we compromise a lot, and that's a hard lesson to learn, but it's one that unfortunately is a reality, and so but having said that, the going back to the cameras and the Sony Venice and the Rialto, we should talk about the Rialto part of the Sony. This detachable lens, let's call it, for not highly technical terms, but basically a detachable lens. Like, you are literally carrying the lens in your hand and the body is tethered somewhere else. And we used that a lot extensively on season 2. It helped us to really get into tight corners, because we don't like to move walls out that much, Tom, right? You agree? I mean, we tend to not move walls and pull walls out, even though we can. We
It's
want
time.
to start. We want to keep the claustrophobia as well
Yeah.
of the scene and the set. And you don't want to start pulling the set apart, because then you get into another visual and another dynamic. So the Rialto was very helpful. It made us, it gave us the opportunity to get into really tight corners.
Did utilizing the Rialto, and if you can expand on what kind of lighting you did to help with that illusion of movement that you had to constantly create, because this is a train that's constantly moving.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's
being on set as well as you,
Totally.
obviously you guys, nothing's moving. You're on set.
Well, everybody knows the term poor man's process by now, right? So we know what that means. That's when you fake, two people in a car, they're driving, and you create the lighting around, and you have green screen or blue screen behind them. You create some interactive lighting for them, or people on a plane, characters on etc. The poor man's process. Well, on a show, you probably maybe do that once, twice, maybe 3 times, right? So Snowpiercer is entirely a poor man's process. The whole show is a poor man's process. We are constantly trying to think of ways to create the illusion of movement, whether it's with the lighting, whether it's with shaking the train, atmosphere, smoke out the window, all kinds of stuff, and so and Tom, you probably can attest to that, how many times and how much thought we would put into, how to create movement, either with obviously we had the high tech of it, which was hanging our lights outside the windows and creating chase lighting, going in a particular direction, depending which way the train was going. We always had to kind of orient ourselves into which way was up train and which way was down train, so we knew how to program the lights. And then we had that as a base, and then we would add, right, Tom? We would add like mirrors and stuff on spinning wheels and Mylar. And then what was the low tech version of it?
Well, I remember one
lowest tech version.
We're ready to shoot a scene, and the writer comes in and says, "Hey, we're in the frozen Amazon jungle. There should be trees going by." I go, "Oh, thanks for telling me." And we had to throw together some rig on a bicycle. Oh, yeah, we took one of the wheels off one of the carts, a little bicycle wheel, and put some sticks on it and threw a light behind it, and did it a couple of times down through every window and spun them around, and it managed to make it work. But yeah, and it was like Owen he had very special hands, Owen.
Well, we have a grip whose name is Owen, and he on the fly, he would go by a light and wave his hands in front of it to create movement. And these were things like, we were talking the other day, is like, sometimes you come on set and you have 10 things to think about at the same time that you have to figure out. And sometimes one of them is going to slip from your brain, or your memory and or whatever. And you kind of think of it at the last minute. And,
It's funny, in season 2, we finally got our chase lights together so that they could work. They were even more sophisticated, so that we could do a random pass of lights. It wasn't a repeating pattern all the time.
That actually brings up a good point, Tom. That brings up a good point, which is the importance of dimmer board operators nowadays. Yeah. Right? I mean,
expand on that for people that are not.
Well, that is because that's talking about the technology and how it's changed the way we work. Dimmer board operators are a intricate, very important part of the process nowadays. I mean, I spend most of my time, with my DIT on the monitors, and I like to have my dimmer board operator, whenever possible, as well, right next to me. Because we are controlling, particularly on this show, we're controlling so many light cues and so many chase effects, and we have to randomize them. And we have events that are happening outside that affect the interior of the train that we have to, work in sync with what VFX was going to look like, a year from now when they start, when the show comes out, and we have to interact with them. And so the dimmer board operator needs to really know his tool, his board, and really needs to work quickly because, we are under time constraints. And so it's become a very, very important part of the process now.
And on top of,
I want to interject.
No,
I remember
please.
I think it was in season 1 when the wires got crossed and I was asking for something to happen through the dimmer board, and somehow it was happening on your set. And
Oh yeah.
Oh, do you remember that?
No. Well, it's because we're using Wi-Fi and everybody's, the lights technology is just crazy. It gets so complicated now sometimes.
So, and speaking on technology aspect of things, you guys, there was some wireless issues because everything on set is wireless, especially on your show with the wireless lights and the camera systems and all that stuff. So it was pretty interesting to see how that unfolded and how that was fixed. But I want to take a couple questions that have just come through. This is kind of for both of you. It's interesting. What was your favorite scene to shoot and why? This is from Brad Wilson.
Oh.
There's a scene that's a sequence of scenes that I thought that I enjoyed because they happened in the first episode, and they kind of show the progression of one of the characters, Leighton, from the tail section, where he's taken from the tail section and he's dragged through various cars and a journey. And it's kind of the first time the audience really sees how the train is connected in a way, and how the characters are able to travel in the train, because the train is 1,001 cars long. It's a train that's miles long. There's a system, a subtrain system. It's almost like a mining vehicle that is on a rail that travels under the train, and it's able to travel fast to get to up train or down train, whichever, it depends where you're going. And the character ends up eventually in the later part of the scene, ends up in the dining car with the bright sunlight hitting his face and his eyes. Here are the stills.
Yep.
So this is the beginning. You're in the tail section. You can just scroll through these really quick. There's Tom again.
Wow, I'm a handsome guy.
What? Oh, there he is. And going into this, not to interject, because I want you to continue, and when the stills get brought up again, and then we'll go to Tom. But one of the things that I saw in the first 2 episodes that really, really hit me was when Andre first saw daylight for 7 years. It took 7 years for it to and that really struck me. And when the stills pop back up, and we get to that, because you're sort of establishing the look at the back, and then all of a sudden, boom, he sees the light. So if you could expand on that as well. I don't know if that's one of your favorite scenes, but I just kind of wanted to bring that up.
It kind of is, only because it kind of illustrates the travel through the train, and it shows you certain processes that happen on the train, this is the character, Ruth, who's in hospitality, and she has been coming down to the tail section to take one of the characters with her. And if you can scroll through the next, that's Leighton. He's going to be taken in, and you can just keep going through these, because there's like 12 of theirs. There's Ruth again. He gets dragged in to the next. So this is another part of the train he gets dragged into, which is called biosecurity, biosec. And this is where all the passengers in the tail section, they have to go through this cleaning process, and they put drops in their eyes, particularly on Leighton, who hasn't been out of the tail section in 7 years. They put drops in his eyes because he is going to be about to see the sunlight for the first time. He goes through the utility car, which is all the batteries that power the train. goes down to the subtrain. It's got scattered lights in it, and it's heavy in fog, as you can see, in atmosphere. Gets on the train, comes up again, goes through another utility car, and then comes out and gets blasted by sunlight, which we enhance by just, I enhance it by just pounding a bunch of 12Ks through the windows, right into the lens. And working with focus and slow-mo, you get the sense of how disorienting it is for him to be seeing sunlight for the first time. And he's finding his bearings to where he is. He finally can see a little bit, and then eventually he looks out the window and sees what's happening to the world, and how it's frozen. And this is a good example of interacting with VFX. I lit that scene with a warm kind of tungsten, sunny, warm feel to it. Even though it's freezing outside, the sun still comes out, right? And so it's one example of our lighting driving the visuals of VFX. So they tied in that warm light with a more of a warmer tone frozen world outside than you would suspect. Normally you would go blue or cold, but I really wanted to bring in the contrast of sunlight into the coldness of the scenes that came before that.
I loved it. I mean, when he saw it for the first time, it was very impactful for me as a viewer. And just to see the lighting aspect as well as the camera work, all that involved is huge. And how about you, Tom? What was your favorite scene?
I think I go by favorite sets. I think my favorite set was the night car. It was always changing. Sometimes there was a show on and there was lots of stage lighting, and other times it was quiet and dark when nobody was around and people were talking intimately. And behind the night car is what do you call that? The little room that they go in. It was such a pain in the ass with our projectors. What was that room called?
Oh, the simulation room?
Yeah. Oh, we had a name. We had a name for it. Anyways, the simulation room was. It must have been an 8-foot square cube with basically no set deck except a bench and rear projection screens. And it was I liked that because it was so bloody challenging. There was nowhere to hide a light. And basically you had to be lit by the screen itself, which wasn't enough unless you were going to blow out the screen. And it was Dave, one of our electricians, that came up with a great idea to put just a little square of light off camera that could, again, with our dimmer op, could fade up and down to accentuate the effect of the screen. And it was really challenging to do this, what seems like a very simple set. So I think that was my favorite.
And is that where he was having his dream sequences?
Yeah. He comes in and there's water playing on all 4 screens, so he's in this little box of a water effect.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, there's that scene that you shot also, Tom, because this is probably a good segue to talk about alternating DPs and what happens in reality on shows like these. It's like sometimes you alternate, you have your own episodes. Sometimes you're shooting a scene for an episode that's not yours. And that goes both ways. That's just the nature also of what we do. That sounds a little bit like, guns for hire, but that's what we are. You are there. And so if somebody's shooting an episode, the other DP who's prepping might have to jump in and shoot a second unit that becomes a scene that's in somebody else's episode. So it's fair to say that there are scenes in the first 3 episodes that I shot mostly, I'd say, 80% of it. There's scenes that Tom shot as well. And certainly there's scenes of mine that are in his episode as well, and that's just normal for everybody. But there's a really beautiful scene that Tom did in episode, I think it's episode 2, isn't it? where you go into the simulation and there's a flashback
Right.
that Leighton has a flashback into, they're transported kind of visually into the past when they lived in Chicago, him and a character, and they're in a park, and then they end up eventually being in bed, naked in bed, and it's a beautiful sunlight coming through, and that was a really good opportunity for Tom to show off his zero optic lenses that have very, very extreme shallow focus. When you open them up, they are like just razor thin, and for this kind of a flashback moment, I think they work beautifully, Tom.
Yeah, they were good. But there's another example of how cinematography is becoming a team sport. That set was very rudimentary, and in fact, the scene outside in the park was basically all green screen. And Jeff Scott, our visual effects supervisor, added a sort of a smeary effect, missynced what it's stolen from the moving picture, the film world, when the camera's unsynced from the movement is out of sync. He applied that to the scene and gave it a whole other look. We had no idea that was going to happen. We just shot it. We provided building block, and then somebody else adds to it, and later on they make it brighter.
Isn't that
Unfortunately, that is the case. Yeah.
It cuts both ways. Yeah.
I have another question here for you gentlemen, from Greg Sparling. Speaking of references for the look of the show, how much did the look of the comic book that Snowpiercer did it come from go into the filming of the show? Any sort of? Well,
I mean, I can certainly speak to that, having prepped a lot of the early on, and also I lost Tom. He doesn't want to hear this.
It's getting cold outside. Close the door.
I've done shows before that are based on graphic novels, like Preacher, for example. And I'm not a big fan of graphic novels in terms of like I don't have a collection of them. I never kind of followed them, but they are very interesting to look at because they don't follow a particular aspect ratio. They are rectangles, they're circles, they're squares, they're
circles.
Sometimes there's not even a frame, and they're superimposed on one over the other, and so visually it's a bit of a jumble, but you can see the impact that each frame has in that way. In that way, it creates motion, I guess. For Snowpiercer, the graphic novel is in black and white, I believe, right? And it's very stark. And so there's honestly very little that I think I could draw from it in terms of bringing into the show. I mean, obviously we had a stronger visual reference in the film by director Bong, right? That we had that reference was a good one, and also like what I showed earlier, paintings and still photographs, still photography and stuff. I think it was very important for us, and Tom, I think you'd agree that we needed to always keep the train present as a character of the show.
Yeah.
In other words, never forget that you're on a train. That was our motto. Whatever set you were on, you had to. We always tried to strive to have that perspective of shooting along the length of the train rather than shooting sideways. We shot very little sideways. We mostly blocked or choreographed scenes through the length of the train so that we could see the perspective. That's what made the images so interesting for us was the vanishing lines and the perspective of the train. And so it was very important for us to do that. So, the film, I think, had some of that. We definitely took some moments of the film that highlight those things. You know, obviously the film is 2 hours, and they had months to shoot 2 hours worth, and they did a great job. It looked amazing. Our budget is different, and time constraints are different, but it helped to have that as a reference to help us design certain shots, particularly in the tail section with the train moving in the background. You know, that is something that we took from the film, you know, to create that movement of the train behind characters.
Nice. And on that topic and note, what DPs, looks of films, movies inspired you both to get into this business and to want to be a DP and shoot film? Anything particular? I'm sure it's a vast amount of things, but just out of curiosity on that same one.
Well, for me, it was my mom.
Hmm.
I always wanted to be a stills photographer. I wanted to be an artist, you know, like Minor White or Ansel Adams, and my mother was a fashion designer, and her idea of photographer was that cigar smoking, lecherous guy who was always trying to make time with her models, and she clipped out an ad from a newspaper looking for a summer apprentice at the National Film Board of Canada, and gave it to me, and I said, "Hey, you should do this." And I applied for the job and got it. So it was good. But my hero's always been Storaro, Haskell Wexler. Yeah, those two guys. And yeah, old school guys, I guess.
I know them well. They're great guys. Great. John?
I mean, that's a long list of influences. I mean, I was first, I think, influenced early on, not knowing that, you know, that I wanted to be in the film business. That actually came later in life, in my 20s. But early on, my mother's a painter and my dad's a musician. He's a jazz guitarist. So I always had music and art growing up, and listened to a lot of music. You know, when I visited, you know, I visited my dad who lived in New York. I grew up in Mexico with my mom. My mom had a lot of art books, you know, and I would just spend hours looking at different paintings and artists, and really kind of just trying to understand, you know, the stories that were being told in those paintings, you know. And I think eventually when I got into film, I could marry those influences together, and I learned, I started learning on the job, really. You know, I became a camera assistant and I started learning on the job, and I was lucky enough to work with some really talented DPs, you know, Amir Mokri, Chivo, Dion Bibi, you know, you know, many others. And also I worked with Michael Mann on many of his films, and I learned a lot from him. Wow. So those are the things that I just, it became an evolution for me in terms of learning the language of film and learning about film on the fly, on the job, until I was ready to make the jump myself and into the creative aspect of it, in the creative world of cinematography, you know. And obviously along that time, I admired cinematographers like Connie Hall, Sven Nykvist, you know, Nestor Almendros. I mean, they were all just, you know, I tended to be drawn by the naturalistic DPs. But then I saw Blade Runner, you know, Jordan Cronenweth, and that was like, that blew my mind. You know, that was like, that is so impressive. That film to this day, I mean, I think there's two films that are like, for me, are at the top in terms of what there's everything in them for me to know about cinematography. One of them is the Conformist, that Storaro shot.
My favorite film.
That's amazing, and that's a go-to reference for me, that film. Yeah. And the other one is Blade Runner. Those two have
my wife's favorite film.
Yeah, I mean they're amazing, aren't they? I mean, you have everything there. It's great.
Interesting point. I think Nestor Almendros. I think he wrote the best. He wrote the best book on cinematography that I've ever read. A Man with a Camera.
Man with a Camera.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful book, full of humility and great artistry. It's a great read, that book.
Well, with that too, sorry, in shooting this and knowing the limitations that you had on the small cars and, there's hardly any exteriors, if any at all. What did you find the most challenging thing as a DP on this particular project? What would you maybe do over again if you had that choice to do it over again, or that option to do it over again? Kind of a two-part question.
Go, Tom. I'll let you go first.
Because you don't have an answer. I don't know. Yeah, it's difficult. I think for me, the biggest challenge was the claustrophobic sets. It was something that contributed to the look in an enormous way, but it was also a really difficult challenge to contend with. Just the physical restrictions of the way a camera moves through a car, especially in the tail section, right? It's jammed with people, and you have to move the camera through that crowd without feeling the actors and the second, the extras making way for it. Mm-hmm. So that was always a difficult thing to do. For me, that was the biggest challenge.
I don't think there's I think the first season we were just learning how to navigate through these sets and how to shoot them and how to be able to be on schedule. Therefore, in prep, I thought we needed more cameras. We needed more bodies to be ready in different configurations, so that we could have the Steadicam, the handheld, the remote head ready, the cable cam ready, etc. Ready to go. So we had to have more bodies, and we got a bunch of reds for the first season. So we were able to afford that and be able to do that. And that helped us in terms of being able to navigate through the schedule and through these sets and starting to learn how to create some interesting shots in each set. I think there was always a challenge. When we came to season 2, I think we had a better understanding of the sets, and we were able to prepare a little more and get in some more interesting rigs to be able to move, because that was always the challenge, is to move the camera through these sets with all the extras, especially when you have extras. We didn't have the advantage of being able to put a techno crane in there. There's no room for that. And Steadicam, there's limited abilities. So, we had one interesting rig that Kevin Black, our key grip, came up with. Remember Tom in the tail section, which is he built a rail system on the ceiling next to the overhead practical lights, and that was then teched up by art department, by the scenic painter, so you didn't really see the rails. And he built this cart from parts of an RC vehicle, right? An RC remote control and RC motors and stuff like that. And he built this cart that he attached to the tracks above the ceiling, that we were able to put our Ronin head on it with our new addition to our camera arsenal, which was the Lumix, right? Which we should mention, the Panasonic Lumix we used a lot on the show. There it is right there, and I have one too. They're amazing, those cameras. Anyway, we used the Lumix compact camera, and we were able to travel above the characters. The height was perfect. We were able to travel above the characters. So that's one example of just the kind of challenges you face. But the beauty of it is that with every challenge, there's a solution. There's like somebody comes up with a good idea. It could be anybody. Could be the key grip, the gaffer. Everybody's really chipping in into being creative. That's what I like to be on set. Is I like to bring out everybody's creativity. You know, it should be like you were saying, Tom, being a team player, right? Not shut yourself to other people's ideas. Be open to everybody's ideas on set. You know, because you never know where they're going to come from.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think we
Just
shot
like this one with Kevin.
Yeah. We shot most of it on handheld, didn't we? I'd say 90% was handheld.
Well, that was the season two. The season two,
Yeah.
we had a different director, showrunner, Christoph.
Yeah.
And also the story evolves in season two. Therefore, the look evolved with it, and the new story or the new look of the show involved being handheld throughout all of the train. In other words, what we were doing on season one, we were trying to separate visually by being handheld and rough in the tail section or in third class, and being always on Steadicam or a stabilized head in first class. And so the visual representation, not only in lighting, but also in camera, to separate those two classes. And I think what you'll find, without giving too much away about season two, what you'll find is that the whole train has become kind of one in a way. Everybody in the train is going through the same experience. Therefore, the whole train is handheld, you know.
We also had the full frame camera in season two, which changed our perspective enormously. It made a huge difference.
It did.
I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
One question and then another sort of short thing. One question that just came through: the lens choices for the show. What made you choose them? And I know, I know.
You go first,
well, we
John.
laugh. I know we laugh because I picked the Sigma lenses because they're, first of all, they're not the most perfect lens. They're not the cleanest lens, which I kind of like. But I also like the size of them. They're consistent in size and weight throughout the set, and there's like 14 of them in a set.
Yeah.
And they're fast. You know, they're a 1.4 lens. You know, so it's a fast lens. And I felt that we just needed to have compact lenses because we were in a train and we didn't want to get into bigger sizes and stuff. We wanted to minimize the weight on Steadicam, on handheld, on everything, you know. And we knew that we were going to be using only primes. Even though we had zooms, we never used them. We stuck to the primes. We wanted them to be consistent in size for the focus pullers to be able to attach their motors and everything be very quick, you know. And also, I own the set of lenses, so that was the other reason. And then Tom, you can speak to the lenses that you brought in.
Well, I've had a set of, I've had a set of old Nikkor lenses forever. I mean, since like decades. And the company Zero Optic just announced that they were rehousing them. I've tried to use them. I use them on a red a lot. They're a pain and they're really difficult for the assistants. The results are beautiful, but they were very impractical. And so I had them rehoused, and this was a great opportunity. I was like a kid at Christmas. I was too excited to leave them in the box. So I used them on the with John's blessing, I think, on my episodes. And they're beautiful. They're sort of, they have a kind of a softness built into them. They're flawed. They were the best they could do in the 70s and 80s, and they were still handmade. They have a handmade feel to the look of them. I really like them. So,
but what was interesting, Tom, is that we tested them. Remember?
Yeah,
we tested them, and we found that at a 2.8, they were very similar to the Sigmas.
Yeah, nice.
Therefore, it's not like we changed the look dramatically using different lenses from the different episodes.
And they
match pretty good. But what was interesting about yours, if you want to talk about it, is that once you open beyond a 2.8, you know, you get a very interesting, different look to it.
Yeah, the highlights flare a lot, and they're very the edges, you know, especially on a full frame camera, you really feel that quality. The edges blur a little bit, and they have you know, a little bit of coma, and they just have a human feeling to them, and it's different from adding, you know, taking a master prime or something, or, you know, and putting a diffusion filter in front of it that sort of affects the image overall. They have qualities, and I mean, the flaws are their qualities that become a very strong, and they just have a great flavor to them. I really enjoyed them a lot.
Well,
Unfortunately, we restricted ourselves. I think, you know, a 28 for us was a super wide lens. We normally shot with a, you know, the 35, the 40, the 50. That was about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes something a little longer on, but
Well, there's some reference stills in that folder there, Chad, that reflect the lens choice. It says, and I think it's just an example of the very rough, you know, visualizations that we did just on an Artemis on your iPhone, you know, just being in the tail section of a train and seeing what does the 24 look like as opposed to a 35 or a 32.
yeah.
And we realized that a 24 just makes the train look so much bigger than we want, you know. The perspective, here it is. Yeah, so that's the 24, you know, right? So you see a lot more on the sides, and you see all the perspective, the lines vanishing down the center. But when we put a 32, which I think is the next lens, that makes everything a little more claustrophobic and a little more compact. And so that's how we, you know, we kind of decided, once we're on set and looking at, again, at the lenses, is like, I don't think we want to be that wide in this train, particularly in that train. It's not to say that we didn't use the wider lens on other trains, particularly in Nikkor, but for the tail section, this was too wide, and the 32 felt more the look that we wanted, the claustrophobic look to it.
And the great thing about the lens choices that you both made is they all cover full frame, and we all know the big push with full frame these days.
Yeah.
And Tom, I know that you have the Clavius lenses that we have here with us, and John, you also have the uncoated Sigmas now, and it's great to see the vast amount of lens choices that are being, you know, given to DPs like yourself that do cover the full frame push that we're having right now.
I think, if I can say something really quick,
absolutely.
I think that's very important. I think that's very important, is that the choices that we have now in terms of creating a look are on the show are in digital it's very difficult to stand out with the cameras. In other words, the sensors all tend to give you the same look. You know, the sensors are amazing, but what really makes a difference are the choice of lenses. And those are really kind of our own last resort, if you want, of how to texturize the image differently, you know, and your choice of lens, you know. And that's why, you know, a lot of people are using vintage lenses nowadays, you know, because we want to kind of degrade the sharpness and the cleanliness of sensors, you know, and give it some life, give it some texture, you know. Not that you want it to look like 35 millimeter film, but you want to just make it look different, you know, and depending on the project.
Film stock was a huge part of the signature.
Exactly. And the process that you could do with film stock, right? Push, pull, all that.
Yeah, bleach bypass, all that stuff. That's all gone now. But now we kind of fake it all, put hairs in the gate and scratches after the fact instead of worrying about them.
Yeah.
Now we have a few minutes left, but I have two final questions for you, and we can go a little over, but I could stay on the phone with you guys all day. Talk to us about the collaborative process with the rental house. Did Keslow Camera make any custom solutions for you or provide out-of-the-box ideas to solve anything that you guys had on set?
Well, I mean, I can speak to the what Keslow did for us on season 2 was gave us the ability to be able to use the Venice cameras, which was I'm really grateful for that, because it became a you know, how should you say it, a budgetary concern. You know, certain cameras are more expensive than others, you know, and so that was a big help. And getting us the Rialto as well, which was a game changer. I can speak to that on Snowpiercer. On Westworld, I can also speak to how Keslow got us the HD taps on the film cameras.
Yeah.
That was also very helpful because, you know, switching from digital to shooting on 35 millimeter film, like I was doing from Snowpiercer to Westworld, you know, you got to change your brain, but it takes a little while to adjust and to go back to using your light meter. But having at least a decent HD tap on your film camera, just to as a reference to look at, was so helpful on Westworld. So in that respect,
well, everything's
you know,
everything's updated now. Monitors and things like that, they can't work with old NTSC
I know.
things. So
Yeah.
you have to get the digital.
They're difficult to get, those HD taps. They're not easy to
Very,
get. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Tom, anything particular sort of stand out for you?
Well, John, I mean, I'm always a great fan of Keslow. It's my go-to company. And, but John made the equipment selection, so I just kibitzed from the sidelines. But yeah, I mean, always if we ever have a problem, give him a call. Something, you'll fix it. You know, it always gets resolved.
Well,
So
also, you know, I can give you an example, not so much in Snowpiercer, but again in Westworld, that I needed a certain lens that I wanted to use in the scene. It's called the squishy lens, right? And the squishy lens was a Claremont thing. And so obviously now that, you know, when Keslow bought Claremont, took over Claremont, that became available. That's still available to us, I think, which is a great thing, that we have all that old inventory that you can go back and get the image shaker or the squishy lens and those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Denny, is by the way.
Yes. Blur tars, like Tom mentioned. A lot of great product that we were able to get in that.
Yeah.
And it was it's been fantastic to be able to do this, and I wouldn't be here in Vancouver if it wasn't for it. And I love being here because I came from Los Angeles. But the last question I have for you guys, and we're going a little over, but again, it's hard not to with you guys. What have you guys done to keep busy and to keep sort of the artistic juices flowing during this time of quarantining and the pandemic that's happening? Anything that sticks out?
Well, I'm lucky to live in the Pacific Northwest. So I have the ability to, you know, and I'm very lucky about that. I feel very lucky. The ability to go out in nature, you know. I've taken up paddleboarding big time. So I go out on the water and spend hours out there, and it's, you know, it's the best way to social distance and also to think, you know. I mean, it's so quiet, it's so beautiful. And I take my camera and I shoot stills, you know, take my camera out, and I end up shooting nature a lot, you know, and that keeps me going.
Nice. Tom?
Yeah, I've been working on I do my own, I make documentaries on my own, my wife and I, and I've been working on my last film. It finally gave me a great opportunity to start cutting and thinking more clearly about, because when you go from job to job, there's no time. Yeah. So my new film is I've shot in with I have a hand crank Mitchell NC camera and 16 millimeter Bolex, Super 8, regular 8, that SH1, S1H, and I've been shooting, and all kinds of you know, home movie digital material, and I'm putting it all together now. So it's been a great opportunity for me. Or right now we're in the cutting stage, so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun mixing the mediums. I mean, the 35 millimeters all 133 black and white double X. So that has a whole look to it that's unreal. It's fantastic. And then the S1H is super sharp with the modern lenses, and So that's what I've been doing. And eating
Well-
and drinking well.
That's right. Cooking, a lot of cooking, right?
Yeah.
And maybe playing the guitar back there, if I can see that.
Playing a lot of guitar. That is, I love it. It's like,
Well,
that helps.
thank you guys both so very much for joining us, and it was a pleasure. You guys know I'm a huge fan of both of yours. I love working, collaborating with you, helping you in any way possible. I wish you all the best, your families as well, and I hope to see you guys in person very soon, and I think that will happen. So
Hopefully.
thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice seeing you,
Thank
Tom.
Nice
Take
seeing you,
care.
John.
Bye,
Take care.
guys.